Alright guys, so things are getting very interesting in the Middle East. We are seeing quite a bit of power moves in the chaos of the crisis. Have you ever wondered why Iran suddenly went quiet? It's kind of weird that they went from threatening revenge, vowing brimstone and fire, to being completely silent. Was Iran afraid of the US, or maybe they were just posturing? But the real reason might be something even more practical. In our lead story today, Saudi Arabia offers Iran investment to limit the Israel-Hamas war. It seems MBS is offering Raisi a deal to back down and reining Iran's proxies in the region. And if it does, the kingdom will boost cooperation and investment in Iran. Now, this is a power play by the Saudis, and it shows that MBS is trying to navigate this conflict and come out ahead. He's trying to position Saudi Arabia as the regional power in the Middle East. And the first part is to push for peace and try to secure it. And by now, we know the main threat of escalation comes from a response to Israel's war on Gaza. There are proxies in Syria and Iraq, the Houthis in Yemen, and of course, Hezbollah up north in Lebanon. While there's a truce going on, the situation is very far from stable. There's no official ceasefire yet, so things are still on a powder keg waiting to explode. Netanyahu has committed to going back into Gaza to keep fighting. There's no situation in which we do not go back to fighting until the end. This is my policy, this is exactly what we will do. So if you're Saudi Arabia, you can't have Iran suddenly go in and destabilize the region. That's because it's still a very real threat. You have hosted the Arab Summit, you flew all the way to China, and the Houthis are just at your southern border. The last thing Saudi Arabia wants is for their oil fields to go up in flames. Yes, the oil price might fly up, but you won't benefit if you can't export it out. You already have a big hole in your budget and the situation isn't looking good. The kingdom just borrowed a whopping $11 billion to fund their deficit, the majority of which came from Chinese banks. This is a short-term solution, but they have to find a way to stabilize the oil price without risking their supply. In 2022, Saudi Arabia was one of the few economies in the world that had an insane GDP growth of 8.7%. That's almost double-digit growth. 8.7% makes every other economy in the world, including US, China, and even India, look like snails. However, there's a big problem now. Saudi Arabia isn't a diversified economy. 40% of their GDP comes from the oil sector and crude exports, and as the price of oil continues to fall, the kingdom could enter a recession in 2023. In Q3 this year, GDP has actually crashed down to minus 4%. It has been steadily dropping since the start of the year because of a weakening global economy. This impacts the demand for crude oil. The Saudi economy is starting to contract, so MBS isn't playing any games here. His deal with Iran revolves around stabilizing the Saudi economy first and foremost. And once again, I have to pull up the maps. Saudi Arabia lies just before the Strait of Hormuz. There's a shipping route controlled more or less by Iran, which almost all of Saudi oil exports have to go through. They call it the oil artery of the world because 20% of global oil consumption goes through this narrow strait. So far, nothing has happened yet. However, Iran has threatened once again to close the choke point. It's a black swan event waiting to happen the longer Israel keeps pounding Gaza. But let's go beyond that. What I suspect here is the Saudis are trying to play both sides again. They are trying to play nice with both Iran and the United States. They don't want a China brokered deal with Iran to go to waste, but they also want Washington's help to diversify their economy. Remember the Israel-Saudi normalization deal? MBS probably wants to revive it down the road, and the only way they can do it is if the Middle East has been calmed down and Iran has backed away. It's inconceivable now to talk about it, but 12 to 24 months down the road, it's highly possible to restart the normalization deal once again. Let's recall the terms and conditions. Saudi Arabia wants a stronger US defense pact, which means buying more weapons without restrictions. Help to develop their own civilian nuclear program, that is a big one. And here's another vital one. Major progress towards a two-state solution, the creation of a separate Palestinian state. I think MBS is gambling big here. If he can pull this off, then Saudi Arabia will effectively become a regional power not just in OPEC but the entire Middle East. They can diversify their economy away from oil, but at the same time cover their behind by supporting a Palestinian state. We have confirmation from the Assistant Secretary of State that Washington and Saudi Arabia are working together to rein in Iran. Now, this shouldn't come as a shocker, right? Both sides want to revive the normalization deal, and for MBS, it's all about the Saudi economy. According to BNP Paribas, the kingdom is expected to enter recession in 2023 thanks to their oil revenues dropping. If we look at the bigger picture here, OPEC as a whole is being threatened by US maneuvering. The United States has made a pivot to South America to develop oil production there. The lifting of sanctions on Venezuela, guys, wasn't by accident. It was a strategic move to flood the world with more oil to counter OPEC. That's why US oil majors are flocking to Guyana as well to extract oil out of the ground. From the FT, Chevron follows Exxon to Guyana's oil riches. They are headed to one of Latin America's poorest countries to harvest wealth out of the ground. Chevron's $53 billion deal gives them access to Guyana's 11 billion barrels of offshore oil. At today's prices, that's almost $900 billion worth of oil controlled by a US company. So you can see how the Saudis need to find a new way out of this other than just cutting oil production. But let's shift towards Europe because the Ukraine conflict won't be ending anytime soon. We have a stunning admission from Biden officials that the fighting will drag far into 2024 and beyond. So hang tight because more deficit spending is coming and inflation will still be a problem. In a story from Reuters, Putin won't make peace in Ukraine before the 2024 US election. This is very interesting because it hints at what the Biden administration is really afraid of. We just need to dig under the surface a little. According to a Biden official, Putin won't make peace before he knows the November 2024 election results. There are concerns that a potential victory for former President Trump could end Western support for Kiev. I think Biden and friends know that the jig is up. They are trapped and trying to justify prolonging the conflict well into 2024. If you don't expect Putin to make peace till after the elections, that means any calls for negotiations will be seen as either a hoax or insincere. So they have set the stage for protracted conflict where money and arms will keep flowing to Ukraine. We are just having a reprieve here, guys. The war isn't over. A big defense bill is coming, and that, of course, means more bonds will be issued to raise the cash. The US Congress has vowed to pass a massive $886 billion defense policy bill by this year. This amount includes support to Ukraine. You can only approve this if you're absolutely sure that the war won't end and that it's great for the US economy. And here's the funny thing, President Biden is working overtime to show the House Republicans that aid to Ukraine benefits the American people, that it helps the US economy. In Joe Biden's new show and tell lesson, he has drawn up a map of the economic impact of aid to Ukraine. According to the map, states like Pennsylvania received over $2.3 billion in investments to build munitions for Zelensky. Other states like Arizona and Arkansas also received billions of dollars. Biden has taken a big U-turn on his sales pitch for more funding. He knows selling the war funding based on national security isn't going to cut it. So he's selling Bidenomics, the war version instead. Basically, war is great for the US economy and can help prevent a recession. This is really bizarre, but perhaps not the biggest reason why Biden wants to keep fighting. I really think he's afraid of a Trump win in 2024 that will end the war. You see this picture? This is Biden and the neocons' ultimate nightmare. They are afraid of Trump brokering a peace deal with Putin if he gets into office. In fact, I think they are more afraid of Trump winning the elections than Putin continuing the war. A Trump peace deal means that the Biden administration has technically lost the war. That's why there's a sense of panic going on in Washington. According to Donald Trump, I would get Putin into a room, I'd get Zelensky into a room, then I'll bring them together and have a deal worked out. This will be unthinkable to both Europe and Joe Biden's legacy. If Trump pulls support for Ukraine, the EU won't be able to keep funding Ukraine forever, especially with their economy on the brink of a recession. I'm sure the whole world doesn't want war. People suffer plus the economy start to collapse. And there's a very interesting chart that I need to share with you. And this shows the economic impact of the Israel war. It tells us the impact on oil prices, inflation, and global GDP. If we are limited to a confined war where things don't blow up, oil prices will increase by only $4 a barrel, inflation will rise by 0.1%, and global GDP will fall only by 0.1%. However, if we enter a full-blown direct war where Israel and Iran they go at it and the Middle East erupts, then financial hell is unleashed. Oil could spike by $64 a barrel, inflation will soar by 1.2%, and global GDP will collapse by 1%. That's basically the doomsday scenario. Obviously, we aren't there yet, but there's always the potential for escalation unless there's a lasting ceasefire. But if we are talking about financial impacts, then Israel is about to get a big shock once the war is over. In a story by Bloomberg, Bank of Israel puts war costs at $53 billion in fullest tally yet. They even activated emergency measures to support their currency after the war began. Now, $53 billion is a huge amount of money for an economy much smaller than the United States. The problem with war nowadays is how it's being funded. You aren't using your central bank reserves, you aren't selling off your stash of gold to pay for it. Modern wars today are being funded through borrowed money by issuing a ton of bonds. And when you keep issuing debt for unproductive activities like warfare, you simply increase inflation and you raise yields at the same time. And that's why when we look at the estimates from the Bank of Israel, their economic indicators have gotten worse. Israel's budget deficit will increase from 3.7% of GDP this year to 5% in 2024. In addition, their debt to GDP ratio will rise as well. You will go from 60.5% last year to 63% this year and up again to 66% next year. And unlike the United States, Israel can't print dollars to fund the war. They also can't issue an unlimited amount of bonds without spiking yields to the moon. Israel's economic problems are going to worsen the longer this war drags out. And considering what Netanyahu said earlier about removing Hamas entirely, this might drag on for months or even for years. It's really interesting if we look at what the market itself is predicting about Israel's economy. They are betting that rates have to go down in order to stimulate spending again. We can see this sharp drop in interest rates expectations from over 4.5% to under 3.5%. That's a whole percentage point drop. The market believes that Israel will crack and lower rates to continue borrowing more cheap money to fund the war. So you can see how horrible war spending is to an economy. Whether it's Israel or the United States, there will be blowback sooner or later. And that's why I find Biden trying to sell war funding as good for the economy as misguided. Even if we put the moral question aside, it just doesn't make good financial sense. Let's head back to the map once again. Notice that it only accounts for $24 billion in economic impact. And the last time I checked, the US has spent at least triple that amount in aid to Ukraine. Where has the other $50 billion gone? If you spend $75 billion and realize only an impact of $24 billion, that's Twilight Zone economics. We are living in a clown economy. You might as well spend the money directly to build infrastructure, education, and the oil industry. You'll get a better return on investment. But let's end this with Trump, because I believe that's the biggest fear Joe Biden has. If Trump gets back into office, we could see a swift end to the war, and conversely, I think the US dollar could strengthen again if Trump deals with the deficits and pumps more oil. Even Ukraine is freaking out with a Trump second term. Zelensky has invited him to Ukraine to tell him peace isn't possible. So we have to prepare for big fireworks in 2024. Biden is so unpopular that a Trump win is becoming more likely every single day. But until then, there's still 12 more months of Bidenomics to go. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Will Saudi Arabia's plan work, and will Donald Trump get back into office? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.